Shalom, everybody. This is Dion Tolly back with another controversial one. Today we're gonna tackle a different subject today, a little off the Paul thing. We'll get back to that in the next video, perhaps. But this is another controversial subject dealing with this term, the Antichrist. I don't know, it's a legend, it's a prophecy, they consider it. It's become a title. It's all kind of madness. And the reason why I'm bringing it, because it's causing our people, particularly the people who should be looking for their return and looking for their, what I consider to be deliverance from the hand of their enemies, as the book of Amos and Micah and a few other places say, that we're not discerning the times we're living in. We're waiting for an Antichrist instead of waiting for our deliverance. When the truth of the matter is that we've been in a situation where there's been an anti-Messiah, if that's the term, because we're going to get into that as well, where there's two usages of the word. Both are translated into English. One is the term Christ, and one is the term the term Mashiach or Messiah. I should say Mashiach. Mashiach is Hebrew. And there is no Christos in Hebrew. There is no Christ. There is no words of that nature. Those are all Greek. So beginning at that point, we get to see that a lot of this doctrine and this concept derives from the lens of a Greek or a Gentile person. Now let's look at what this thing says. It says the concept of the Antichrist in Christianity comes from Judaism, which was influenced by Babylonian and Iranian myths about the end of time and the battle between God and the devil. The term Antichrist first appears in the New Testament in the letters of John. It said first appears, the only where it appears. That's the difference, and we're going to get into that. The Antichrist is described as a human being who is pure evil and will appear before the end of the world. The Bible prophesies that the Antichrist will oppose Jesus Christ. That's what this doctrine is, oppose him. But it's really to oppose Yahushua HaMashiach, or we can say Yeshua the Messiah, and pretend to be Savior in his place before the second coming. The Antichrist is also described in other biblical characters, including the abomination of desolation in the book of Daniel and Matthew, and the man of lawlessness and the son of perdition in a letter of Paul. Now let's get into that a little bit. First of all, we're going to look at all of the different, it's just inundated with all kind of just harebrained concepts. And the reason why I call them harebrained is because when it comes to the Messiah, the Most High talks to us as though we're children, for one. There's no intellectual litmus test that you have to pass in order to understand prophecy. It's just you got to believe. And in order for you to believe, you got to have a certain foundation in certain things to where you know what it is you're believing in. And I know, for one, a lot of people look at, the views on my channel and everything, and it's like, he don't have a whole lot of following and he don't have a whole lot of viewership and whatnot. And it's like, I hear you, but that's one of the reasons why I'm so skeptical of all of these men who do have, or women, doesn't matter, anyone who does have all of this. And the reason why, I'll go to this real quick, is what he says, therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do ye even so to them, meaning do unto others as you would have them do unto you. For this is the law and the prophets. He says, now enter ye at the straight gate. This is Messiah speaking. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there which go therein, or go thereat, go in thereat. Another translation is go therein. Well, he said, but straight is the gate and narrow is the way, which leadeth unto life. And few there that find it. See that? Few be there that find it. So he's saying that this gate, he said it's straight for one. And when something's straight, that means it's normally not allowed, particularly in the sense of being narrow. You're not allowed to kind of walk side by side with someone. It's only like a pathway with just enough room for you. You may have somebody before you or in front of you or behind you, but it's a gate. It's a pathway where only you can walk it in your own line, in your own pathway. And he's saying that there's only few people who even find that pathway. That's food for thought. And he's saying, because there's many false prophets which come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. And you shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs, or thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. And this is something that you need to consider when you think about all of these people with all these large followings. I'm just saying, the devil deceives the whole world. And I didn't say it. He said, Messiah said there's only few who find it. I ain't say it. Now, you want to do your ratio in mathematics? Hey, you be my guest. I'm just telling you. Now, back to what we're here for. Let's go to some scriptures concerning it first. Let's go back. Now let's look at what the scriptures actually say about it. And then we'll go to John and where they get the reference from Daniel. But let's go to what the scriptures actually say about it. Right? All right, let's go into the right. Let's go to the New Testament. Right? All of these are from John. And you notice there is no reference to Antichrist in Revelation. So where is everybody getting this from? Now let's look at what he says about it, though. You got to remember, John is the disciple whom Jesus loved. Oh, Jesus. Yeshua loved. The way they write it is Jesus, forgive me. I got Jesus on the brain. But that is definitely nothing that I take lightly. You know, my Messiah's name is serious. And the reason why it's so serious is because it's a translated name, and we've have it so ingrained in our psyche to where this is the name that we go to and identify with when we're addressing or dealing with our Messiah, when this is a translated name, and a wrongly translated name either, because if you're looking at the name that Messiah's name would have been translated from, it would have been Joshua. And Joshua and Jesus are two different words. You can do the research yourself. But Jesus, if you know anything about the etymology of the word, is from the concept of son of Zeus. We got into a little of that from the last study, where a lot of the so-called apostles who were in sedition, by the way, were going into places where the lost sheep were scattered and teaching this doctrine of not Yeshua the Messiah, but Jesus the Christ. Now, Messiah is Mashiach, and that specifies the anointed one. And the reason why this is relative, because it got a lot to do with this Antichrist and how they made this Antichrist sort of like a good and evil. One is just as powerful as the Messiah, but it's just he represents evil. When the thing about it is that let's look at anointed, right? Let's look at this word. And let's go into anointed, right? And let's go into that in the Old Testament, right? Unless I got too many ends, which I probably do. Okay, now let's go into the Strongs and look at what these words mean. Okay, see that word? Mashak, to rub oil, to anoint, to consecrate. So when you hear Mashak as opposed to Mashiach, one is distinguished from just this action to rub oil. One is the anointed one. And how we know that is, let's go to Messiah. Now look at what Messiah means. It's not the same as Mashiach. It's Mashiach, the anointed, right? And it comes from that word Mashiach. But it means anointed, a consecrated person, as king or priest or saint, specifically the Messiah. So where did they get the Christ from? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Oops. Let's look at this. Now, this right here is the story of Satan, or what I consider to be Azazel. If you ever read the book of Enoch, Lucifer, whatever you want to call it. Those were titles. That's the point of this whole line of discussion, is titles and how they can be not just misconstrued, but they can be used to deceive and put one in the place of another and completely dismissed the original meaning or the original offered title that was given. Now listen to this. He says, now thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God, garden of Yah, every precious stone was thy covering. The sardius, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, the gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pipes was prepared to thee in the day that thou was created. And what is so deep about that is that you're really talking about a combination of the things that make up the priesthood. When you're dealing with, the priest would wear this on the breastplate, where they would have all of the different emeralds and diamonds and all of that on. And then he talks about the workmanship of the tabrets and of the pipes was prepared in thee, meaning the music he sung, which sounded like instruments. Tabrets of strings, pipes of wind, was prepared in thee in the day that thou was created. He said that thou art the anointed cherub. Look at that. So that way, we look at anointed, and he didn't use that word. He's going back to the time when he was in right standing with him. He was in heaven in this. He said, I have set thee so, and thou was on the holy mountain of Yah, and thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. And what that is a reference to the mountain in which Adam and Eve were kicked onto, because according to the book of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden was aloft. It was above the earth. There's a garden, they talk of the hanging gardens of Babylon. I don't know if you ever heard that reference, but it's really a truth to where when you see the story of the Tower of Babel and you see the way they built the tower, that's what they were doing. They were building a tower to throw those arrows and shoot those arrows up into the garden. And that's a really deep, that's food for thought, but we'll get off on that for right now. But he's saying that this anointed, being that he was the anointed cherub, this is where you see them using that term, anointed. But let's see where they're taking it to where it's Christ. Hold on. Let's go to where we go into where they say it's the word Christ, right? Oops, let's see it. It's not in the Old Testament. Okay, now let's go to the New Testament then. Let's go to the New Testament. You see how many times it's all over the New Testament? Christos, right? Christos, from the word Creole. See that? And let's see where the word comes from. Probably akin to, wait a minute, where did they say it came from? Croamai. I got to go look at that a little further. Croamai. Is that where we getting chrome? An oracle, to graze, to light upon. That is to employ, to act towards one in a given matter, to entreat. Creo. Cray. So this seems to me, from G95, Kyer, a sense of congener, hollowness for grasping the hand, especially by Hebraism, means a means or instrument. So this is a completely different meaning. And I know this may seem like a tangent, but it's not. I'm showing you that the term is used to glorify Satan's old status when he was a fallen, before he was a fallen angel. And I know that's a stretch to a lot of people, but it's just a reality. And how I know it is because everything is. Let's take salvation, for instance. Let's take salvation, not slavation, but salvation. Right? And look at what that word means in the Greek. Right? Soteria, to rescue or safety, to deliver, health, salvation, save. Right? And it comes from that word soter. Right? Soter. Sozo. Right? But let's go back to it. This is where we get the word esoteric from. It doesn't mean the same word as, let's look at salvation in the Old Testament then. Let's look at salvation in the Old Testament. All right? Look at that in the Old Testament. Yeshua. See that? Yasha. These are the words that our Messiah's name come from. Deliverance, help. This is the reason why they wanted to stone him. His name means this. Yeshua. Are you getting this? Everything isn't what it seems. Now, going back to the Antichrist, let's look at what that means now. Because where I believe the discrepancy, whether deliberate or not, that comes with, let's expand this a little bit too. And he's saying that discrepancy comes from combining or conflating the concept of the title. Because let's look at what it means first. We were starting on this before I went off on the tangent. He says, now, little children, it is the last time. And as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come. Even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. Who is a liar but he that denieth? You see that? Turned it, locked you into this name. This is what the scriptures mean by certain things we consider blasphemies. And we'll get into that in a minute. And he is the Antichrist. Anybody who denies Yeshua, the Mashiach, is the Antichrist, that denieth the Father and the Son. And every spirit that confesses not that Yeshua, the Messiah, is come in the flesh, is not of Yah, that is the spirit of Antichrist. Whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now have already is in the world. So he doesn't call it that. I'm imagining, and I don't have to imagine that it's that much of a stretch, that this is the word anti-Mashiach or anti-Messiah would have been the proper translation. For many deceivers are entered into the world who confess not that Yeshua, the Messiah, has come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an Antichrist, meaning that an Antichrist is a particular state of being. It's a position. It's almost like a doctrine or ideology. It's a belief system. It's where you oppose, as an adversary, the Messiah. And what they've done, and the reason why the purpose for this video is to show that it's not a title. It's not one specific guy coming that's going to take over the world and do all of these crazy stuff like these, rapture videos, and everybody become, what was that video, that series that the guy from the TV sitcom was on? I forget the name of that sitcom, but at any rate, this thing was, it was all about the rapture and about Left Behind. I think was called the Left Behind series. And this Left Behind series was always, and I think it's because it was been out for a couple of decades now, where I think that they used this and they pretty much shaped the understanding of the Antichrist from this, or the anti-Messiah from this concept, which is completely not just misguided, but misinformed and irresponsible, if you ask me. Because according to scripture, this is what an anti-Messiah is. This is what an Antichrist is. It's not a person. And if it was, why ain't it in Revelation then? It's the New Testament. Why ain't it in Revelation? Why isn't it among those other? Why? And I'll tell you. It's because they've conflated it with the beast. Right? Now let's look at the beast. Let's look at Revelation in the beast. And you see the beast. It's only a couple of them. None of them from the other books of the Old Testament, or the New Testament rather, speak about this beast. So this is all prophetic, right? And he said he stood on, let's look at the first representation of it. That would be 13:1. Let's go there. And he said, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. All right? So we know that that ain't talking about no one particular man that's an Antichrist coming to take over everything and cause of that. So what are they talking about then? So let's move down and see where we can narrow down where they're getting this concept from. And he says, now he saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after this beast. Right? Now, first of all, let's go back to it. He said, now the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet was like a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion, and his dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his authority. So let's see where they got that from. Now, if you go back into the Old Testament, right, and you go into, let's just take the bear. Let's take the bear. I went back into the New Testament again. Let me go back. Let's just take the bear, right? And let's narrow it down. Let's go to Isaiah. As a matter of fact, let's just go to all of the prophets, right? Which we had. All right, let's go to that where it's particularly Daniel, right? He saw a beast, and the second was like a bear, right? So in other words, this beast that we're looking at here, right, is saying that one of the heads was wounded unto death and it was wound, and I'm getting ahead of myself. He's saying that the beast was like a leopard and his feet was like a bear. Now let's go to the leopard, which I should have did first. I don't want to mess up the analogy here. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself and rushing here. So let's look at a leopard, right? And he said, no, and listen to this one. He said, after this I beheld, and lo, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Okay? All right, now. So let's look at the next one. Next. And he says, so it was like a leopard, and he was like a bear, and his mouth like a lion. Right? Now let's look at a lion in that same context in Daniel. Right? And the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings were plucked. And it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon his feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So what does all this mean when you combine all of this? What he's saying is, because let's go back, if we go back to the context of those, each one of these representation of this one beast that he saw that had 7 heads and 10 horns, he said the beast was like a leopard, had 7 heads and 10 horns, keep that in mind, but it was like a leopard. Why was it like a leopard? Because it was part of the absorption of the kingdom that was to be represented by the leopard. That was the Greek Empire. Let's go back to it. Let's confirm that. Right? Let's go back to Daniel 4. Right? He said it was like a leopard, and it had the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Well, that's the Greek Empire. And after Alexander the Great died, his 4 generals took over. That's why he said they had 4 heads. They divided the kingdom up. Right? The first one was like a bear. That would have been the Persian Empire. That's why people call Russia the bear. No, according to this, it was the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire had 3 ribs in its mouth. And if you're looking at the Persian Empire, who it absorbed the empire of the Medes, it absorbed the empire of the Assyrians, and it absorbed the empire of the third one. It absorbed the empire of the Babylonians, the Medes, and the Assyrians. Okay, so those 3 it absorbed. Okay, and the first one was like a lion, and it was lifted up, and he was saying that this was the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. And he said, until the wings were plucked. Remember, the Most High took his authority, had Daniel running the kingdom, and he was out living among the oxen and the animals eating grass. And he basically repented, and the Most High restored his senses back. And these four great beasts were all different empires. So what he's saying here in Revelation chapter 13 is that this beast had 10 heads, 7 heads and 10 horns, but had all of the other empires before them absorbed into his empire. And he said one of the heads were wounded unto death. And the whole world wondered after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And this right here goes on to the continuing 42 months. There is a reason for that. We're not going to get into that at this time because that gets so far ahead of where we're at, intellectually right now. It's just, it would be, to me, it would be counterintuitive to get into that portion of this prophecy. But we will get to that in due time. Now, going to this beast, this is where they attribute this to the Antichrist. Okay? Because they're saying one of this, remember the omen, where he got killed and then he came back to life. So they're mixing all of these prophecies into this one narrative that's just ridiculous. Most High is talking about kingdoms here, empires. And one of the heads, meaning the head of this alliance, which would have made up the 7 heads and 10 horns. And just for the sake of curiosity, I'll take you to who I believe the 7 heads are. And if you're looking at this was the Greek Empire, what empire rose up after the Greeks that would have absorbed all of the empire prior to that? The Romans. Romans were all over the earth. And the 7 heads, who the 7 heads? I know that a lot of y'all won't really get controversial feedback on this one, but let's go with it. 7 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Eyes of the Gentiles. Now, what did Messiah say about that? Let's go to the Gospels. Let's go to the Gospels. Here we go. And Messiah says, when you see Jerusalem copies with armies, that was the Romans, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. That right there told you that was the explicit instructions for any nation that wasn't of the lineage of Judah or Yehuda. You're not supposed to come in there. He's saying because the destruction from the Romans was the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. And the prophets wrote about it. He said, but woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck. For in those days there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. So the Messiah was telling them that this place was going to get over, not just overthrown, but it's going to be a wrath from the Most High on these people. There was pork, all kind of stuff going on in Jerusalem at the time. That's why a lot of them didn't believe, because, you know, you had the temple being taken over by the Edomites, the Pharisees. That's why you notice that he didn't teach in the churches or in the temple. He said, "And they all shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations." No people have been led away captive into all nations but black people. I call them Hebrews, descendants of Eber. "And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles." And he said there's a duration. He said, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So when we look at this passage here, right? Let's go back to Revelation. So we look at this passage here in Revelation 13. There has not been, since the sons of Japheth, which are those of Europe, since they risen up, there has not been anybody else came up to take authority from them. They are still in control. And I challenge anybody to refute that. And it said it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given unto him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And they do run the world. And it says Babylon, as we delved into a little bit in the last one, Babylon is the whore or the woman who rides this beast. You see that? So he's saying that, well, what would be, well, he says, let's get into it. Let's take our time. He's saying that now this other beast came out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. Now, most people thinking that he would go from, which is completely and utterly ridiculous, that he would go from talking about an empire. We just proved this is the empire. That he would go from there to talking about one specific man coming out of the earth. And he said, now the second beast, he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused all the earth and them which dwelleth therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which they should wound by a deadly sword, and did live. Right? And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell to save he had the mark in the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now let's break that down for a second. So he's saying that this second beast came up. Now, if we're talking about nations, we're talking about the real context. We're talking about nations, and this proves that this was nations and empires, kingdoms. Then the second one would be a kingdom. The one that came up last would be another kingdom. Would it not? Had two horns like a lamb, spoke like a dragon. Think about that. Had two horns like a lamb. What lamb represent? Ram represents, would it represent the people of the Messiah? That would have been the people we just read that he said that would be driven out of Jerusalem and scattered around the world in captivity, carried away to all nations, carried away captive to all nations. You read it. So he's saying it's looking like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon, meaning that whatever he looked like, and I would imagine that would mean all of the religious adornment and attire and different kinds of rituals and things that make them look holy. And he said he exercised all the power of the first beast before him and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. All right, now let's look at this. Now, if we're going to look at, first of all, let's look at the healing of the first beast, right? The first beast had a deadly wound. What would you say the deadly wound was? The deadly wound would be no other than the conquest that I imagine happened during the conquest of Genghis Khan. And the reason why I say that, because the beast, if you're looking at the seven heads, who I told you were the seven heads of Japheth, they were represented not by being Gentiles. They were represented as Christians. Gentiles were almost during what we consider to be the age of the Dark Ages and beyond. Muslims were considered Arab, Middle Eastern. Not Middle Eastern, but the people of Middle East and Northern Africa, they were considered Arab because that's the territory that, Muhammad and the Arabs took over. Sure, there were some times where they went into Spain and all that, but they took over that. Christians was identified almost exclusively. If you being a Gentile, you were considered a Christian in them days. And maybe in the days of the Romans and in the days of the Messiah, they were considered Gentiles or Greeks. But in these days, you were considered Gentiles because of the three religions in the world, and not so much the other one. Because remember, the other one, which was our religion, they repackaged it as Judaism. And I guess you can understand where I'm going with this. Is that this situation, when the Judaism, it says that the abomination that maketh desolate, meaning that they could no longer worship, according to the prophecies concerning the children of Israel. They would be scattered all over the world in captivity. And to argue that they came back in 1948, well, that's the reason why I say that this was a thing where it was like they worshiped the dragon. They worshiped the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he said one of the heads were wounded to death. Saying not all of the beasts, but one of the heads. And the reason why I made Genghis Khan, because of the whole Khazarian nomadic tribes that all made up what we consider to be those Mongolian tribes that basically formed an alliance under Genghis Khan and basically took over the world again. But he's saying one of those heads was wounded unto death. And then now that it's healed, it's saying who can make war with it? And the same one who appears to be a lamb. They had a deadly wound that was healed, and now they appear to be a lamb. Modern day Israel is the only nation in the world that I can think of. And it's not about me and what I think, but this is the only scripture applying to, or the only nation that these scriptures apply to. And I refute it. I challenge anyone to refute that. Because after World War II and after what they consider to be the Holocaust, their deadly wounds would heal and can't nobody touch them, especially as far as warfare. And they're saying he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. Well, they don't mean that like this, the first beast is somehow not is rendered powerless. He's just saying that this second beast is using all of the authority of the first beast. If you know anything about the politics of Israel and the geopolitics of what's going on around the world in terms of sanctions and the world markets and the banking, and you ain't down with these 7 countries or these 7 peoples that make up the 7 heads, the Europeans, which I consider the G7, then you ain't getting nowhere. And they're exercising all the authority of that. They're not in the UN or they're not in the NATO and all that, but yet these nations do war for them. These nations protect them. And it's mainly because of them standing up in that respect, which is a blasphemy. Make no mistake. We read that in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. Those who say they are Jews but are not. Messiah spoke those words. So he's saying that this beast that came up last, he's going to force everyone to create an image that should both speak and cause that as many who would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. What do you think that image is? It's the cross. Right? That's the image of the first beast. Second beast has a different image. And the reason why we'll get into this image is because he says, now the second one, because this is the one that I would imagine they're conflating it with. The second beast that basically runs the world. And a lot of people have made the argument that Israel runs America. A little interesting caveat. There's this passage that I read from the Septuagint where they talk about when Isaac was being sacrificed or attempted to be sacrificed by Abraham, that the translation that they used in terms of the sacrifice was Holocaust. So they said that Abraham was about to commit this Holocaust when the Most High sent in the scapegoat. Just a little caveat. And the yellow star, but just go into it. Now he's saying that no man by bias says that he had to mark the name of the beast or the number of his name. So you got different representations. You have a mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Right? And he said, now here is the wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now let's look at this. I got this book here. A lot of people are going to find controversy in this, but I really don't care. So let's go to this. And I'm just now deciding to pull this up, so bear with me. Right? Bear with me. Now, let's look at this. And this should explain everything that I was really trying to illustrate. I haven't opened this up in a while. Hopefully this thing still works. Now he gets into a land known as Khazaria, a land which is today predominantly occupied by Georgia, but also reaches into Russia, Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, Romania, and modern Jewish race is born. The modern Jewish race that incidentally is not Jewish. How can this be, you ask? Well, at the time, the Khazarian people felt a vulnerable people as they had Muslims on one side of them and Christians on the other side of them, and thus constantly feared attack from the other side. Furthermore, the Khazarian people were of neither faith and instead practiced idol worship, which made them ripe for the invasion by a people who wished to convert them to an established faith. The Khazarian king, King Bulan, decided in order to protect themselves against the attack, the Khazarian people must convert to one of these faiths. But which one? If they converted to the Muslim faith, they would risk attack by the Christians. And I was telling you, Christians were the Gentiles. And the Khazarian, these people, they did not, just like Israel today, they don't basically show allegiance to any school of thought or any kind of religion, or they always did their own thing. We can expound on that, but that's enough right there to just contemplate right in and of itself. He said they converted to the Muslim faith, they would risk attack by the Christians. And then they converted to the Christian faith, they would risk attack by the Muslims. He had an idea. There was another race that he was aware of, were able to deal with both the Muslims and the Christians, either side of them, predominantly in matters of trade. A race which also dealt with Khazarians in the same manner. That race was the Jews. And King Balan decided that if he instructed his people to convert to Judaism, he would keep both the Muslims and the Christians happy, as they were both willing to trade with the Jews. So this is what he did. And you got to remember, too, by this time, the Jews that were taken from 2 Kings, let's just go there real quick. Let's go to 2 Kings 17. All right. Now, the king of Assyria, right, he took them and he sent them. He brought them in from these places. Cutha. So that means that if the king of Assyria took men from these lands and sent us to them, and he carried them into Assyria and placed them in Hala and Haba by the river Gazan and in the cities of the Medes. Right? So look, let's look at what Cutha is. Ancient Cutha. Let's see what that says. The Cuthites. Right? He says they claim that the Sumerians were descendants of settlers placed by the Neo-Assyrian Empire. They're getting into it, but let's find out where it is. All right, well, let's go into Cuthians. You got nothing for Cuthians? All righty then. Let's go back. Let's go to Scythians. All right. All right. Mm-hmm. And first, I want to go back to this. Let's look at this word, Cutha, because that's key. Okay, where did I see? Let's go back down to it. And Cutha. So it's a province in Assyria. Cutha. Right? Now, Now he says, now the Scythians, sometimes referred as the Pontic Scythians, were an ancient Iranian, equestrian, nomadic people who had migrated during the 9th to 8th century BC from Central Asia to the Pontic steppes in modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia. Skilled in mounted warfare, the Scythians replaced the Agathyrsi and the Cimmerians as the dominant power in the western Eurasian steppe in the 8th century. And in the 7th century BC, the Scythians crossed the Caucasus Mountains and frequently raided West Asia along with the Cimmerians. After being expelled from West Asia by the Medes, the Scythians retreated back into the Pontic steppe and were gradually conquered by the Sarmatians. This is where they get that term, the Samaritans. This is who they are. And they were placed there in the cities of the Medes. Remember that? And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. Sepharvaim, you know that's Spain. Hamath, Syria. Ava, which is one of the cities of the Medes. Aval. A lot of people say that that's with the V replacing the S in a lot of cases, that could mean Asia. Could mean Asia. Anyway, getting back to that, forget where we were before I got into that little side step. Oh, the synagogue of Satan. Now he's saying that he had an idea, and he said it. So now listen now. He said that there was another race that he was on, that they were able to deal with both the Muslims and the Christians on either side, and predominantly made as a trade. A race which also dealt with Khazarians in the same manner. That race was the Jews. So now we know that if they replaced the children of Israel with these people who were from this area, and they were left to this area as slaves, and after the fall of the Assyrian Empire and the fall of the Babylonian Empire, particularly the fall of the Persian Empire, who absorbed all of these, then a lot of these people were able to basically live a free life. We know this from Acts. Let's look at that. We know this from the book of Acts, right? Where he says that, I think that would be the second. Now he says, now the day of the Feast of Trumpets, which was been called Pentecost. Pentecost is some esoteric stuff again, they calling it. 5, meaning the 5-pointed star. And if you know anything about the 6-pointed star and their esoteric value, we ain't going to get into it, but you know where I'm going. Now he's saying that all of these nations came here. Now he's saying that they were all amazed and marveled, saying to one another, behold, are not these all speak Galileans? And how do we hear every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? He's saying Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and dwellers of Mesopotamia, and in Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, and Egypt, parts of Libya. So they were all over the world coming there. But this is what I want you to, Parthians and Medes and Elamites. Parthians, what's Parthians? Let's go to that. I'm going to keep that open. Parthians. Parthian Empire. All right? Parthian Empire, known as the Arsacid Empire, was a major Iranian political and cultural power centered in ancient Iran. See that? See if I could see that. So this is all that area, Ukraine and all that Black Sea, Caspian Sea. All this is where they're saying that Khazaria was. And all of these nomadic tribes originate from this area. Bactria. Every time I see that, I'm thinking bacteria. Don't know why. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to what he goes back and says about, because remember, we were dealing with the mark of the beast. Now he's saying, now he would live to see his country unconquered. His people convert to Judaism enthusiastically and adopt the principles of the most holy Jewish book, the Talmud. Got to remember, that's books of sages and sorcerers and what I consider to be the Babylonian priest, high priest. They consider to be the, what do they call them? The Kassites, which is another word for Hasidic. But that's another one that we can get off on a tangent on. So much hidden stuff right in our faces. Well, anyway, the Talmud is not scriptures. It's interpretations, it's opinions, it's different kinds of rhetoric and different kinds of things that, commentary on things pertaining to scripture and culture and other things that they deal with, but nothing to do with the law. And we know that because the Messiah told them that they don't fulfill the law, despite them trying to say that they were the enforcers of it. Anyway, he would not live to see his Asiatic race of converts to Judaism. One day, 90% of all the Jews on the planet called themselves Ashkenazi Jews, when in fact they were not Jews, but simply an Asiatic race of people who converted to the Jewish religion, while still continuing to speak the Khazarian language of Yiddish, totally different from the language of Hebrew. He would not live to see his people turn to the descendants of a man, a far more powerful man than him, who would be born just over 1,000 years later in Germany, a man named Bauer, who would spawn the Rothschild dynasty. He would not live to see his dynasty usurp the wealth of the world through deception and intrigue, which they would finance through the vast riches they accumulate as they usurp the wealth of the world by gaining the control of the world's money supply. He would not live to see his people demand a homeland for themselves in Palestine as their birthright and ensure every prime minister there from its inception in 1948 is an Ashkenazi Jew, even though their true homeland of the Ashkenazi Jews, Khazari, is his kingdom, since 800 miles away, some 800 miles away. He would not live to see his people fulfill Bible prophecy as the synagogue of Satan. Now, I wanted to skim down and look at this thing where they get the mark from. So it goes into a little bit of where they come from, a little history they get into with them. But I'm going to skip to the Rothschild dynasty, which is the 17th century. Now it says here that he talks about all of the money that they gave and that they were starting to deal with by basically controlling the money supply. He said maybe this Shabbos Goy, a non-Jew who chose to clandestinely represent all the interests of the Jews and merely outlived his usefulness to the Jews behind the scenes. And I'm assuming they're talking to William III, this guy with the Bank of England and the roots thereof, but that's a whole other story. Now, he says, now, February 23rd, Meyer Amschel Bauer, an Ashkenazi Jew, is born in Frankfurt, Germany, the son of Moses Amschel Bauer, a moneylender and a proprietor of the counting house. You know what a counting house is? That's because of the fact that at the time of the what we consider to be not the awakening, but they call it the Renaissance. The Renaissance was basically a period where after the Black Plague and all of the different things that were going on in the race for the New World, and the Catholic Church and Dum Diversus and all of these different things, there were people just now starting to earn a living independent of the government and independent of the Catholic Church. A lot of entrepreneurs and people didn't know because of the Catholic Church's stranglehold on education. Only the wealthy and the elites and the affluent can learn, or the priests. Then people now was just starting to earn their own money, and they didn't know how to count it. They were uneducated. They didn't know how much money they had. So they would bring their money to him, and he would count it for them. He would tell you the value of their house. Call it a money lender, but this is also the definition of a money changer. He said, now Moses Amshal places a red hexagram above his entrance door to his counting house. This sign is a red hexagram that geometrically and numerically translates into 666. You got to remember, the Greeks used what they call those alphabets that are also a numerical representation. They're both. They're a number and a letter. And they have a geometric function to them. 6 sides, angles, triangles, the whole thing. And he's saying that under this one, this geometry, his number is 666, which under Rothschild instruction will end up on the Israeli flag some 2 centuries later. And then he gets into what we know of as the Zionists and the Illuminati and the whole 9 yards. But I just wanted to give you a representation to why they say that this is the number of a man. Because his name was Bauer. And this name, this red hexagram, it was used to represent him. And how you don't believe me? Think of the differences in you can understand the education level among, you can understand the education level among Gentiles at this time. All right, now let's look at what that word means, the word. So if we were looking at numbers, let's look at that so the word ain't there. Let's look at the New Testament. I know the word is there. Yeah, it is. It's there. Okay, now let's look at the word. All right? Now, what is a word to them? A logos. So to the Greeks, the word was a logo. See that? This was his name. It said Rothschild. What? Meaning red shield. Remember the esoteric? Red shield from what? You really don't want to know the answer to that one. Do your research. I'm going to move on. And you see that? Let's go back there. Now you see that, folks? So he's saying this thing here, that here is when, and let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. So how could it be the title of one man coming when it's the number of a man? And they're not telling you the name of either. So where would you get this idea that it was some specific man coming, like it's a pronoun or something, like he's the Antichrist, the one? When he's telling you it's the number of a man. And this logos, right? This logos represents this people. It's just blue now. And if you know anything about sanctions, and you know anything about the money system, and you know anything about credit and all that, come on. And I know for a fact, my brother visited, and I know that a few other people that have visited Israel. If you're either any one of these other religions outside of being a Christian, they ain't letting you in. And that's funny because it tells you that they're going to set up the image. You know anything about the Pharisees and who they converted to in terms of setting up this image and setting up this religion we know of as Christianity? Then you know that they were the ones who, the Pharisees, they were scribes, which means that they knew the law and they knew, as Herodotus and all of these Eusebius and all of these other, nefarious characters from the past. They were the ones who made up the Nicene Commission. They were the ones who translated or transformed Constantine's pagan society into a Christian society. They translated the New Testament. So they set up the image. You understand what I'm saying? This thing is not to be messed with. People are taking this thing like it's some kind of remote thing that's coming down the future, when you could look at things right now and tell that for this thing to happen as they want it to, like some Antichrist stepping up and taking over the whole world, used to be dead and came back to life, and all of these other Marvel comics book stuff that they got you coming and thinking about, then you know that that's impossible according to these scriptures. Because right now, these people who are in control of this earth, the only way they're going to get dislodged from it is if the Most High himself come and do it. They're not giving it up. And the Most High could do it many ways. Through his people, through his angels. And you heard the scriptures. He tell you he's going to send his angels to the four corners to gather his elect. And it has nothing to do with an election. So get that out your head too. These are people that he's considered his children. And when it comes to this prophecy here, has nothing to do with what you believe when it comes to the blood. Nothing to do. Remember, he told him this. He said, now know for surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation, remember we didn't get into this last time with the prophecies of Babylon, but this is singular. This is in plural. This is one nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And this one nation happens to be the woman that's riding the beast, running the world. And he said, that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterwards shall they come out with great substance. And they shall go to their fathers in peace. And thou shalt be buried in a good old age. He was talking to Abraham. Now, this is what this thing is distinguishing, because you notice from Exodus 12:1, 12:40. All right? Let's go to Exodus 12:40. He tells you here, he says, now the mixed multitude that came up with him, flocks, herds, and every much cattle, and he tells you all of the things that they did, and the sojourning of the children of Israel, which is different from the other one, because that was affliction, total affliction. This one is a sojourning. There's a distinction. Who dwell in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years. So you know this not talking about so the Exodus was 430 years. This is he's saying 400 years. Now, if you know anything about the children of Israel in America, they went into captivity in 1619 from 20 slaves. Called them the 20 and odd. Do your research. And in 2019, we had the George Floyd riots, COVID, weather, storms, hurricanes. inflation, immigration, influx, you name it, wars, terrorism. This situation is the judgment has begun. And he's saying at the end of this, which is not a timetable, wasn't an overnight judgment when they were in Egypt. It was over time. Each plague was over time. And before I close this out, I wanted to take you in there just so we can get a better understanding of just the concept of the mark. And I think this illustrates this most because you got to understand something. Revelation, is this talking about this? And the seven heads, I remember just a little caveat, the seven heads of Japheth, 10 horns. Remember, and this is in 17, it says these 10 crowns which you saw, right? Or the 10 horns that you saw, and in 17 they have 10 crowns on. Let me get my words right. I'm fumbling because my mind is racing here. I'm always getting ahead of myself. Well, anyway, he said these 10 kingdoms hadn't received a kingdom yet, but will reign 1 hour with this beast. So he's saying at the end of this, they're going to reign 1 hour, which I'm assuming this other beast was the second one that came up. And how we know that to be true is, let's go there real quick. Okay? Let's go to Psalms 83. Now he's saying that these are enemies. So off the bat, you know that the Most High is talking about Israel's enemy. And his prayer is to make sure that they don't go unpunished. He said, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee. If we know anything about the 40-year captivity and our whole narrative, this is a fact. And they have taken thy crafty counsel. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. And they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation. That made it possible for another people to rise up instead of us. That the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together in one consent, and they are confederate against us. The tabernacles of Edom, that's the first beast. And how do you say, well, how does that deal with them? And let's just go to something real quick that should basically change your whole mind on that. This is just 1 second. Let's just go to Hittite. Oops, spelled that wrong. Right? Now let's go to the Old Testament. Right? All right, let's go here. He said, now Esau, where we get the term Edom, was 40 years old when he took the wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite. So it doesn't matter what color he was. Gentrification, marrying and whitening down. Hittite, let's see who the Hittites were. All right. Let's go to that. Let's go to ancient images. Not getting anywhere on that one. Not getting anywhere on that one. Giving you an idea of what they look like. But let's look at where they came from, the area they come from. Let's go to the area they come from. And let's go to all. Okay? So I don't have to find the pictures. I just have the basic common sense, right? To where world history, I wanted to go to Wikipedia, but we can go either way. Doesn't matter. Hittites occupied ancient region of Anatolia, also known as Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. So he married into Turkish women. Which is really deep too, because if you look at this, right? Let's look at Turkey, right? And let's look at Chittim, right? At Chittim, right? You see that? The Greek word for Chittim, I mean the Kittite, is a Cyprite, an islander. That is the Greeks or Romans on the shores opposite of Palestine. So then you know these are Greeks or Romans that are of the children of Chittim, right? Now let's look at that word Hittite. Kitty. That's the same word. See how it changed from Kittim to Kittite, or Kittim to Hittite? They took the K pronunciation out, and they're telling you that the Chittimites were basically originated from here. This is Esau's fingerprint on it through the Hittites. And I got so many foolish notions that I hear going around, and there's this tribe in Africa that's the Edomites. The Edomites run the world. Make no mistake. I don't care where you come from, where you looking at, or where you've been taught from. Everybody in their right mind know that Edom was running the world today. And if you don't, you're uneducated. You're misinformed. He would lift up himself, as Obadiah says, as the eagle. And that could be the Roman Empire or pick any European empire of your choice, even America. And there's a Jewish community in Germany, Jewish British community, Jewish Swedish community, Jewish Italian community, Jewish Spanish community. So come on. But the reason why I wanted to close it out with this particular one is to give you an understanding of just how the spiritually, because you got to remember too, the concept of, particularly when it comes to the last days and these things that we seem to be deceived and enamored with their doctrine. Where were we at? 13. So we go into 13, where I wanted to give you a concept about this mark. That he was going to give a mark of the beast. And the reason why I say that is because of the concept coming from Gentiles. So if they, like I said, if they think salvation is esoteric and logos is the reason, a pictures is worth 1,000 words, you get it all, then their concept is off in terms of just the mark itself. And if the Hebrews have a different lens that they look through, everything looked through by the prophets in the Old Testament in their history, then we have to understand that we can't go by this. We can't go, not by the scriptures, but we can't go by anything we've been taught by Gentiles concerning this. Okay? Now let's look at this. Let's look at this Mark in the Old Testament. Let's look at Mark in the Old Testament, and particularly the prophets. All right, let's get rid of that. And then I'm going to close this out. Now, look. I put it back on this. Let's go back. Okay, now let's open it up a little bit so you can see. Now, he said, Son of man. Let's get to the story now. Okay. That would be 9, right? All right, now. Now, behold. Let me see if the story starts in 8. Now, the story starts with Ezekiel. He's a prophet. Very powerful prophet. He's a student in so many ways, but he was the Most High who saw things relative to John and the things the Most High did with him in the spirit realm. Now, he says about a vision he had here, or the Most High took him out of body, or I don't know. I mean, you make your own judge when it comes to that. He said he beheld and looked the likeness of an appearance of fire, and the appearance of his loins even downward, and the fire from his loins upward, and the appearance of brightness, and the color of amber. And he put forth the form of an hand, and took me by the lock of mine head, which to me is a dreadlock. You can't take nobody by the curls. These people who got these locks today wearing curls. Let's not get it twisted. Anyway, the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven and brought me to the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, which was the seat of the imagery, which was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. And behold, the glory of the Elohim, which was there, according to the vision that I saw in the plan. And he said unto me, Son of man, lift up thine eyes toward the way of the north. So I lifted up my eyes toward the way of the north, and toward the northward gate, and altered this image of jealousy in the entry. And he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. And he said unto me, Son of man, dig in the wall. And when I dug in the wall, behold, a door. And he said unto me, Go in, and behold, the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable things, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. Okay, and where was I? All right, here we go. And there stood 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Jazaniah the son of Shaphan, which every man his censer in his hand. And a thick cloud of incense went up. And then he said to me, Son of man, which thou hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the chambers of his imagery? For they say, the Lord seeth us not. And the Elohim hath forsaken the earth. I'm say Elohim, I don't like that Lord. And he said unto me, Turn thee yet again, and see thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. And he took me to the door of the gate of the house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. If you know anything about Tammuz and the whole concept before, because there was a, trust me, there really was. There was a concept of the Messiah coming of virgin birth before that. But the Most High killed him, and this baby didn't come back. And that would have been, some people say it was Nimrod. Some people say it was another one that came through later on with Janus and Jambres. And I've heard a lot of stuff through the years. But either way, this is a representation of why we get this white Anglo-Saxon image of Yeshua called Jesus, feminine man, and all of this other stuff that is timid and all this other stuff that You know what I mean? It just really is just blasphemous in so many different ways. And anyway, well, this is where the concept comes from. And he says now, he said, he brought me to the inner court of the Elohim's house and brought me, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Elohim, between the porch and the altar, were 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Elohim and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. So in other words, he was showing him through the vision, I believe, was an image of the Star of David, or what they could call the Star of David, which is really just a hexagram. They saw the cross, and they saw this other altar where the men were worshiping the sun in Islam. And we know that logos is the sun and moon. And they pray toward the east. He said, therefore I will deal in fury, and mine eyes will not spare, neither will I have pity. Though mine eyes, though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, yet I will not hear them. So let's go into 9, where he gets into where I mean about the mark. And he said, and he cried also in my ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. So he's saying that cause them that have charge over the city to draw near. And behold, 6 men, and that could be ambiguous in that, because in these days that could have been Nebuchadnezzar at the time, or the Assyrian, but whoever was in charge of the city. And he said, behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which led toward the north, and every man had a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn in his side. And he went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of the Elohim of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen. This is in the throne now. And he's showing him this vision from there. And he's saying, okay, wait a minute. They're not in the throne. And he says that this man came towards the north, every man, and one man came with him among them, clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn in his side. And he stood beside the brazen altar. So they were beside the altar in the Holy of Holies. He said, and the glory of Elohim of Israel was gone up from the chariot, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Elohim said to him, go throughout the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And the others, he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite, and let not your eyes spare, neither have ye any pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, and come not near upon any man whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto them, defile the house, fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. And they went and they slew the city. And it came to pass, while they were slaying them, I was left. And I fell upon my face and cried. And he said, Elohim, wilt thou destroy all the residue of Israel and pouring out thy fury upon Jerusalem? And he said, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceeding great, and the land is full of blood, and the city is full of perverseness. And they say, for the Elohim has forsaken the city, and the Elohim seeth it not. As for me, mine eyes shall not spare, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense their way upon their head. And behold, the man clothed with the linen, which had the writer's inkhorn on his side, reported the matter, saying, I have done thou as thou hast commanded me. And behold, and he goes into the story to where The firmament above that was above the head of the cherubim appeared over them as it were a sapphire stone, and is upon the appearance of that of a likeness of a throne. That's why I said it was a throne. And he spoke to the man clothed with linen and said, Go in between the wheels, even under my cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. And now the cherubim stood on the right hand of the house, and when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. Then the glory of the Elohim went up from the cherub and stood over the threshold of the house. And the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full with the brightness of the Elohim's glory. And the sound of the cherubim's wings was heard even to the outer court, as the voice of the Elohim, or the Almighty, went from when he speaketh, rather, jumping all over the place. And it came to pass when he commanded them, the man clothed with linen, saying, Take fire from between the wheels and between the cherubims. Then he went in and stood beside the wheels. And he looked, in the four wheels by the cherubs, one wheel by the cherub. And he goes through all this, and they went on four sides, and he took them up. So in other words, Ezekiel was looking at a vision that took place in real time that happened to Jerusalem during the time of Ezekiel. Now, it doesn't tell you which emperor, whether it be Nebuchadnezzar or the Assyrian king, which would have been Shalmaneser or a couple of them, and Sennacherib, a few of them. And he says, now, they came to the higher gate after he called all of the men, and there was one that he clothed linen, that was clothed with linen with a writer's inkhorn by his side. This, I submit to you, is Enoch. He's redeemed. Remember, the linen represents redemption. When you see the white robes, as you do in Revelation, that's the redeemed. And he had a writer's inkhorn because the Most High, if you've ever read the book of Enoch, I encourage you to, he was the man instructed by the Most High to write down the deeds of mankind and the deeds of not just the sins of all of the world, but specifically the sins of those who the Most High considered to be his people, that were of the lineage of Adam and Seth. The other nations which would have been fallen under Cain, because he preserved his seed through the flood as well, they would have been under other angels. That's why he said that prophecy, that I'm going to put enmity between thy seed and the seed of the woman. That's why a lot of things that happen in terms of the spirit realm don't happen to the black people. And if it does, it's by them looking and conjuring and seeking these demonic things themselves. But our covenant protects us from a lot of that, even in captivity. Don't get it twisted. But you got to be a part of it, and you got to get in there and blood oaths and all kind of other stuff, and you can become a part of it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as it stands. And this is the reason why Enoch came, and he took account of all of those who protested and were against all of the wickedness that was going into Israel. So he put a mark in them. And I'm assuming they didn't even know it was a mark. That this mark, as was Enoch, wasn't visible to everybody else. It wasn't visible to the people. So I doubt if they saw him or the spiritual men that were with the weapons of slaughter. And he marked them all. And when he was done, he went and reported the matter. And you notice in 8, he tells him, when he talks to the man with the inkhorn. Let me go back. I might have missed it. Now he says, now there was a man among them clothed with inkhorn, and this guy, apparently, he was able to be in the vicinity of the glory of the Elohim. Remember, he told Enoch, come sit by my right hand. Got to read the book of Enoch. He's the first prophet among them. He was the first to learn writings, if you read the book of Jubilees. He's the first to learn writing among men. And it's before Cain and Abel's people. So you see that concept as it comes from the Hebrews? So how did that relate to Revelation 13 then? Well, that means this mark would have been the opposite, right? This mark here, he said they would be in their right hand or in their foreheads. So this is invisible as well, this mark. But look at what it is. The way the other one was is that this mark was all of those who protested it, who stood against it, who cried out for the wickedness that were going there. This mark is all of those who consent, who either got his mark in terms of this, the Star David, who is named, meaning Christos. Could mean Christos, Muslims, or the other one, or the number of his name, which would have been the geometric function we know of as the hexagram. And when you deal in gram, you're dealing with numbers. You see that? So he's saying the people who are into this lifestyle, that are worshiping it, that consent to it, that believe in it, that work for him, that go out and do things promoting this image or this knowledge. He's saying that you are part of the system, and anybody who's not a part of this can't buy or sell unless you down with these. And we know that against just think about for a second what they do when it comes to anti-Semitism. And what would happen if you're mounted in anti-Semitism or somebody that you don't consider to be a Christian, a Muslim. And think about it, Muslims acknowledge this Jesus Christ. Blasphemy in the sense that there's a messenger that came after him, because Messiah is the first and the last. And there's no one come by him. And that's what we're getting into with Paul. He came afterwards. So this whole situation was to set up this beast. And this beast system is divided into religions. And we got three major religions. A mark represents one, name represents another, and a number represents another. And I think they're interchangeable. Because the whole world is deceived by either one of them. And with that, I'm going to close this thing out. I've given you a lot of information, and I thank you very much for listening. And I pray that this finds you well, and that you'll be able to absorb some of this, and it'll be good to your benefit, to your fortune, to a blessing to you. I pray that it'll be a blessing to you. Open your eyes. Because the days are not just being shortened, but the Messiah, his return is at hand. I can't tell you that's enough. There's prophecies that tell you that the people, particularly Esdras, second Esdras, Ezra, if you will, that there are times in which we live in, which we deem as the last days. Ezra prophesied that the people won't even know they're living in the last days. They'll be clueless to the times that they're living in. And it's because Christianity keeps talking about wars and rumors of war and the prophecies of beginning of sorrows, making you think that this beast, when he comes, he's going to take over everything. But there seems to be a remote event that's going to happen in the future. When all of these scriptures I just read to you already happened. Remember, he comes like a thief. You understand what I'm saying? So that means this thing is going to come upon you. That's considered, if you want to look at something that'll give you pause, make you take stock, read, specifically if you got a tool like eSword, read the references and how many times in the context of, that they're mentioned in. Read the context of the day of the Lord. Think about that day of the Lord. It should give you pause. And that's why this situation is so important, because it's designed to keep you looking for some beast that coming through this enigmatic, shadowy, smoke and mirrors type figure, when deception don't go that way. Deception doesn't see you coming. That's why I always said that if there was such a thing as an Antichrist, the way that they set it up, all of the information that you guys had, particularly based in that doctrine, everyone would see him coming a mile away. Where's the deception? He's got to fit this, he's got to fit that, and all this other crap. And it really is irrelevant to the scriptures. And I want to say this just for clarity so we can leave on this note. Multitudes. Right? Let's look at that. Now, he told you the waters which the woman saw is where the war sitteth. Now, the horse sits on the world. If she controls the beast, and she's sitting on the world, who has 7 heads and 10 horns, which would make up the 7 heads that control the world in terms of the Gentiles, Europeans, and the 10 horns who received their kingdoms in 1948 after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. The Iraq, Syria, Iran, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all of the nations, Lebanon, all of those nations, they got renamed. He's saying that all of these priests where the children, where the horse sitters, he's saying that they have sway or control over the whole world. And he said they're peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And this is what we're saying before. The 10 kings that you saw are 10 kings, which received no kingdom as of yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So it's a lot. I know I'm back and forth with it. This is a lot of information that you have to discern the holy from the profane. Or you're going to be lost. And if it comes to the logo and the representation, because make no mistake, if you're a Christian, then you fall under the banner of the Catholic Church. So I don't know what these brothers is with, they're talking about how they somehow are distinguished from the Catholic Church or somehow Protestantism. That's nonsense. 50C3 stuff with all of your tax exemptions and all that prove that that's nonsense. Catholic Church is in control. That's just the priests of it, though. That's not the beasts. Catholic Church make war with nobody. Catholic Church is a mockery today. These nations we're talking about, with kingdoms. That in 1948, if you notice that all of these kingdoms that emerges, they all had literal kings over them. The only standing monarchies in the day are what? Because the other nations took them all over. But what are the three standing monarchies? That would be the children of Saudi Arabia, or the Saudi Arabians, and the English in Jordan. Rest of them got presidents and all that other stuff. But in terms of monarchies, those are the only three standing. That is an actual kingdom with a king. And let's look at this. And who did he say would escape out of this grips of the Northern Europeans, or the Europeans, the sons of Japheth? He said that these three will escape out of his hand, and he'll enter into the glorious land. You got to remember, they're all mixed with Gentiles. And many countries shall be overthrown, like I said, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom. I told you that the children of, we consider to be the modern day Jews, Moab, Saudi Arabians, and the chief children of Ammon, and we know of in Ammon, Jordan. So this can't be refuted. Don't even waste your time. And I say that not arrogantly. I say that with a sense of urgency. That don't waste your time trying to play around and play with me and just oppose me. You got the same tools that I have available to me that are available to everyone. Do your due diligence. And with that, I'll say shalom. That's a good one. Oh, I thought I did end it. I did end it.